I want to talk to you today about something very important, the early warning signs of a migraine. Why? Because I've learned that the better we know our bodies, the more peace and comfort we can find, even when a migraine is looming. When we were younger, many of us tried to just push through headaches, or we didn't recognize the hints our body gave us. But now, with the wisdom of years, we can be more in tune. I've personally walked this path, noticing subtle signals, those little whispers before the storm, that a migraine might be on its way. By catching these warnings, I've often been able to prepare myself, lessen the impact, or even head off a migraine before it fully strikes. In this video, I'll gently guide you through 8 early warning signs of migraines in older adults and how to manage them. I'll share what each symptom feels like in simple, everyday terms. No complicated medical jargon here. I'll also share some personal anecdotes, either from my own life or from dear friends like you, to show you how these signs appear in real-life situations. And for each sign, I'll offer a natural, practical tip on how to deal with it. Think of it like sitting down with a wise friend who's saying, "I've been through this and here's what helped me." Our journey will cover signs ranging from mood swings to visual disturbances. Some may surprise you and some you might recognize and say, "Oh, I felt that." By understanding these signals, you can take action. Maybe you'll decide to rest a bit, avoid bright lights, drink some water, or have a chat with your doctor. Every small step can make a big difference in how you weather a migraine. So let's begin, shall we? Let's talk about those subtle clues our bodies give us. The first one is something you might not immediately connect with a migraine at all. It has to do with our moods and feelings. Warning sign 1. Sudden mood changes. One of the earliest signs I've learned to recognize is a sudden change in my mood. Have you ever felt off for no clear reason? Maybe unusually irritable, snapping at your loved ones when normally you'd laugh things off, or oddly anxious and restless like something's just not right. Sometimes it's not even a bad mood, it could be feeling overly excited or giggly out of the blue. I used to brush these feelings aside, blaming a poor night's sleep or just one of those days. But I eventually discovered that, for me and many others, these swift mood changes can be an early warning sign of a migraine. Migraines aren't just head pain. They can actually start affecting the brain long before the headache hits, even influencing the chemicals that regulate mood. So that unexplained gloom or agitation may not just be random. It could be your brain sending a smoke signal that a migraine is on the horizon. Let me share a little story. A few years ago, my grandchildren were visiting on a Saturday. I love those visits, the house fills with laughter. But on this particular day, I remember feeling strangely irritable. The kids were just being kids, a bit noisy, and normally I'd join in or gently calm them. Instead, I found myself getting snappy. I scolded my grandson Tom for dropping a cookie crumb and later felt awful about it. It was so unlike me to be short-tempered over something so small. That very next morning, I woke up with a pounding migraine. Only later did I connect the dots. My irritability the day before was actually the migraine's early whisper. It wasn't that I'd suddenly become a grump, it was a symptom. In hindsight, even the type of mood was telling. I wasn't just grumpy, I also felt restless and uneasy, like I couldn't settle down. Some migraine sufferers describe it as a sense of impending doom or just feeling out of sorts for no obvious reason. That was exactly how I felt. Why is this important? Because recognizing mood swings as a warning sign has allowed me to be kinder to myself. Now, when I notice I'm uncharacteristically irritable or anxious, I pause and think, could a migraine be coming? Instead of feeling guilty or worrying that I'm just becoming a crotchety old lady, which I promise I'm not, I take it as a cue to take care of myself. How to manage it? First, I gently let my family know I'm not feeling my best. I might say, "I'm feeling a bit on edge today, I think I might be coming down with one of my headaches." Simply communicating helps others understand and support you. For instance, my family then knows to keep things a little calmer around the house. Next, I try to de-stress. I'll find a quiet spot and do some slow, deep breathing. Sometimes I put on soft music or nature sounds to soothe my mind. If I'm up for it, I take a short walk in the garden to ease that restlessness. The key is to do something calming. By reducing stress and overstimulation when I sense a mood shift, I find that the coming migraine doesn't hit me as hard. In fact, some days I've been able to ward it off entirely, possibly because I caught the warning and responded with relaxation. It's like hearing a distant thunder and deciding to head inside before the storm arrives. Above all, don't blame yourself for the mood swing. It isn't a character flaw or just old age grumpiness. It's a biological symptom of the migraine process. Treat it as you would a sniffle before a cold, a sign to take it easy. And of course, if mood changes are severe or very frequent, discuss it with your doctor because it's important to rule out other causes too. But in the context of known migraines, give yourself grace. Your body is just sounding an alarm bell, and by listening you can find a bit of shelter from the storm to come. Warning sign 2. Frequent yawning and unexplained fatigue. Now this next sign might sound almost too ordinary. Yawning. Yes, believe it or not, yawning a lot, and I mean a lot, one after another, can be an early sign of an approaching migraine. Along with it, you might feel a wave of sudden fatigue as if you haven't slept, even if you actually got a good night's rest. I remember the first time I heard about this, I chuckled. I thought, well, I yawn because I'm tired or bored, what's that got to do with a migraine? But then I started noticing it in myself. There were days I would wake up feeling fairly fine, but by late morning I'd be yawning nonstop, one gulp of air after another, and feeling so sleepy I could barely keep my eyes open. It was a peculiar kind of tiredness, not just the usual 2 p.m. drowsiness, but a bone-deep fatigue that hit out of the blue. Sure enough, on many of those days a migraine would strike by evening. It turns out this excessive yawning is a well-documented warning sign that can show up hours or even a full day before the headache. In fact, people with migraines often report being unusually sleepy or yawning frequently during the phase before the pain starts. Why does this happen? Scientists believe it has to do with our brain chemistry. Migraines can start a cascade of changes in the brainstem and in neurotransmitters like dopamine. Yawning is actually linked to those brain chemicals. For instance, the same chemical changes that cause yawning are tied to the onset of a migraine. Basically, your body might be trying to tell you to slow down and rest before the migraine hits. Feeling wiped out and yawning could be its way of hitting the brakes. Let me give you an example from my circle of friends. My friend Tom, the same fellow I mentioned earlier, is 68 and has had migraines most of his adult life. He's the one who actually made me pay attention to the yawning sign. He told me over coffee one day, I can always tell when a migraine's coming because I start yawning like a fool. It's like I can't get enough air or something. I'll be sitting in my armchair and I just yawn and yawn even if I'm not tired. He said at first he thought it was just boredom or maybe his sleep apnea acting up. But then he noticed the pattern. If the yawning spells hit, a headache often followed. Now he jokes that when he yawns more than a few times an hour, he doesn't need a weather forecast. He kind of knows a brainstorm might be brewing. I've since paid closer attention in my own life and found a similar pattern. It doesn't happen before every migraine for me, but when it does, it's pretty spot on. So how do we manage this? What can we do when we find ourselves yawning incessantly and feeling drained? My advice is simple: listen to your body and rest if you can. I know sometimes we have obligations, but if at all possible, take a break. When I notice that sudden fatigue, I allow myself a short nap or at least a period of relaxation. Even 20 to 30 minutes of closing my eyes in a quiet room can help. I'll often lie down on the couch, maybe with a light blanket, and focus on breathing slowly. This isn't being lazy, it's preventative medicine in a way. Think of it as gathering your strength before the migraine attack. Another thing I do is make sure I'm hydrated. I'll drink a glass of water or a cup of herbal tea. Dehydration can sneak up on us and make fatigue worse, and it can also be a migraine trigger for some. So sipping water is a gentle way to help your body. Some folks find that a little caffeine at this stage, like a small cup of coffee or tea, can actually help ward off a migraine. Caffeine can constrict blood vessels and often is an ingredient in migraine relief meds. For me, I have to be careful with caffeine because it can affect my sleep later, but a half cup of coffee in the late morning, when I sense a migraine might be coming, sometimes gives me enough pep and also seems to reduce the headache pain that follows. Just don't overdo it, especially if you're sensitive to caffeine. One more tip: check your environment. If you're yawning and tired, see if maybe the room is warm or stuffy. A cooler environment can make you more alert. I'll often open a window for fresh air. And ironically, don't try to stifle the yawns. Yawn big and get that oxygen. It might actually help you feel a bit better. If you're in a situation where you can't nap, like traveling or an event, at least try to sit and relax for a moment. And as always, keep note of it. I keep a little diary of my migraines and I note down, felt extremely tired, yawning a lot, on days before a migraine. Over time, this pattern becomes clear, and that helps me take action faster. The bottom line: yawning is your body's way of waving a flag saying, slow down. Heed that flag, pause, rest, and prepare. Often, by doing so, I find the eventual migraine is shorter or less intense, because I wasn't pushing myself through the prodrome, the fancy word for this early phase. It's like giving yourself a head start in the race against the migraine. Warning sign 3. Neck stiffness or pain. Have you ever woken up with a stiff neck and thought, I must have slept funny, or, it's probably just my arthritis acting up? If you're over 60, chances are you've had your fair share of neck and shoulder aches just from daily life. I certainly have. Gardening or even using the computer too long can make my neck cramp. But I learned that sometimes that tight, sore neck, especially when it comes out of nowhere, can be an early sign of a migraine on the way. In fact, neck stiffness and pain are among the most common warning signs of a migraine attack in people of all ages. This one can be tricky for us seniors. We might easily blame it on our spine or muscles or the weather. Who else's joints act up when it's about to rain? Mine do. Yet, I noticed on days leading up to a migraine, my neck stiffness felt a little different. It often coincided with other signs like the yawning or moodiness. It's as if my body was tensing up, especially at the base of my skull, preparing for the headache. Why would a migraine affect the neck? Migraines are more than just a head issue. They can involve the whole nervous system. There's a lot of interplay between the nerves that cause head pain and the ones in our neck and upper back. Some experts suspect that during the early phase of a migraine, muscle tension can build up, or that certain nerve pathways are activated that make the neck sore and stiff. Many migraine sufferers, young and old, report that their neck hurts or feels tight before and during a migraine. It can be a dull ache or a heavy stiffness that makes it hard to turn your head comfortably. I want to share the story of my friend Nancy, a 75-year-old fellow migraine warrior. Nancy is a retired teacher and a very active lady. She does water aerobics and even volunteers at the library. But she started getting migraines in her late 60s, which was a surprise to her since she never had them before. The first few times she didn't catch on to the signs. She just thought her upper neck felt particularly stiff because maybe she overdid it in the garden or slept wrong. One evening she told me her neck was so tight she put on one of those menthol patches and asked her husband to rub her shoulders. The next morning she woke up not just with a stiff neck, but a throbbing headache on one side of her head and nausea, a full-blown migraine. After a few episodes like this, Nancy realized that the neck pain usually came before the headache, almost like clockwork. Now she's very attuned to it. She says, half-jokingly, "When my neck acts up for no good reason, I cancel my plans for the day because I know what's coming." It was a little sad to hear that. We don't want to cancel our plans. But on the bright side, Nancy felt more in control once she recognized this pattern. Instead of a migraine blindsiding her, she could take action early. So, what can we do about this neck stiffness when we sense it heralding a migraine? I found a few simple, comforting tricks. First, gentle stretching and movement. If my neck is tight, I slowly roll my head in small circles. Nothing too extreme, just to get the kinks out. I shrug my shoulders up and down to loosen those muscles. Sometimes I do a chin tuck exercise. Basically, pull your head back gently like you're making a double chin, hold for a few seconds and release. These stretches can relieve some tension. Second, warmth is your friend. I have a trusty heating pad that I drape over my neck and shoulders when I feel that stiffness. The warmth relaxes the muscles and feels soothing. A warm towel or hot water bottle works too. I've even stood in a warm shower, letting the water beat on the back of my neck for a few minutes, which helps increase blood flow and ease the tightness. Nancy swears by those over-the-counter heat patches. She sticks one on the back of her neck and it gives relief for several hours. Heat therapy can be wonderful for this kind of muscular pain. Another thing I do is gentle massage. If you have someone around who can give you a light neck rub, don't be shy to ask. My husband has gotten pretty good at massaging that spot where my neck meets my skull. It's often very tender when a migraine is brewing. If nobody's around, you can do self-massage. Use your fingers to gently press and knead the stiff areas. I sometimes use a little bit of lavender-scented lotion or oil. The scent itself helps me relax. While massaging, take deep breaths and try to consciously relax your shoulders. We often unconsciously hunch them when in pain. Lastly, once I've tended to my neck, I prepare for the possibility of a headache. This might mean I gather my migraine kit. For me, that's water, a cold compress, and my prescribed medication if needed, and keep it handy. If I treat the neck stiffness early with heat, stretches, maybe an anti-inflammatory if my doctor has allowed it, I often find the coming headache is milder. In some cases, it has even stopped the migraine in its tracks, possibly because I eased some of the muscle tension that could be feeding into the pain cycle. One more gentle reminder. If you ever have a new type of neck pain that is very severe or doesn't feel like your usual stiffness, get it checked out, especially in older age. But if it's part of your migraine pattern, then managing it like this can be very effective. By treating that neck pain as an alarm bell for a migraine, you're essentially lowering the volume of the alarm, calming your body, and that can lead to a softer migraine or none at all. It gives you a sense of control, and that's so important when migraines make us feel helpless. Warning sign 4. Sensitivity to light and sound. This next sign is one that many people, even those who don't get migraines, have heard about. But what's interesting is that it can start before the headache, sometimes hours or a day before. I'm talking about sensitivity to light and sound. Have you noticed that occasionally the world just feels too bright or too loud? Maybe the sunlight streaming through the window seems almost blinding, or the television that's at a normal volume suddenly feels unbearably noisy. For me, it often hits when I'm outside. I'll be out for a walk and find myself squinting more than usual, bothered by glare on a cloudy day. Or I'll be in a shopping center and the chatter of people and background music overwhelms me. It's like all my senses are dialed up to 10. This can be a telltale sign that a migraine is coming. In fact, more than 90% of people with migraines experience some form of sensory sensitivity around their attacks. It's a hallmark symptom during a migraine, but as I said, it can actually begin in the warning phase before any pain kicks in. I'll paint you a picture. One afternoon I was driving to the grocery store. It was a clear day and normally I enjoy the sunshine. But I remember that day the sun felt piercing. Even with sunglasses on, I was uncomfortable. Then at a stoplight, a truck honked loudly behind me. I guess I didn't move the second it turned green. That horn felt like a shockwave through my head, way more startling than it should have been. By the time I got to the store, the fluorescent lights inside also bothered me. I found myself shading my eyes in the produce section. I realized something was off. I actually ended up cutting my shopping short, and by the time I got home, sure enough, a migraine was starting, dull ache turning into throbbing pain, and along with it continued light sensitivity, photophobia, and sound sensitivity, phonophobia, during the migraine. Looking back, the fact that normal lights and sounds were irritating me so much earlier was the red flag. Another example. My neighbor George, who is 70, shared with me that before his migraines he sometimes gets extremely sensitive to smells too. That's another sense. Some people can't stand certain odors right before a migraine, like a favorite perfume suddenly makes them nauseous. George said one evening his wife was frying fish for dinner and he had to step outside because the smell was overwhelming him, and the kitchen light felt like a spotlight. A few hours later he was hit with a migraine. Now they both know if George starts complaining about lights or smells out of the blue, it's time to take precautions. So, how do we manage this sensory sensitivity? The obvious answer is to reduce those sensory inputs. Basically, give your senses a break. When I catch myself getting sensitive, I turn my environment down a notch as quickly as I can. If it's light that's bothering me, I'll put on sunglasses even indoors. I have a lightly tinted pair that aren't super dark, so I can still see inside without tripping. I'll also close the curtains or shades in the house to dim things. One of the first things I do if a migraine might be coming is retreat to a quiet, dimly lit room. Even if the headache hasn't fully started, this can prevent things from getting worse. I'll turn off the TV, ask family members to maybe keep their voices down a bit, or I'll distance myself for a while. It might sound a little antisocial, but even 30 minutes of a calm environment can help so much. Another trick, use soft earplugs or noise-canceling headphones. If noise is a trigger or aggravator, popping in a pair of those foam earplugs, the kind you use for sleeping or at shooting ranges, can create a peaceful quiet. I keep a pair in my purse actually. They've saved me in loud waiting rooms and during one unexpectedly noisy train ride. If you don't have earplugs, even covering your ears or moving away from the noise source helps. For light sensitivity, apart from sunglasses, you can also try a cold or warm compress over your eyes. I often take a cool, damp washcloth, lie down, and place it gently over my closed eyes. This not only blocks out light, but the coolness is soothing if my eyes feel strained. Some people prefer warm. That's fine too, whatever feels comforting. During a migraine, many prefer darkness and cool, but in the early phase it might just be about reducing discomfort. If you're outside and can't get away from light, a broad-brimmed hat can cast a shadow over your eyes. I carry one in my car. Also, be mindful of screens, computer, phone, tablet. The glare from screens can be brutal if you're becoming photophobic. I would either take a break from screens or turn down the brightness and maybe use a blue light filter. What about managing sensitivity to smell, like in George's case? If a smell is bothering you, like cooking, perfume, smoke, try to get to fresh air. Open a window or step outside for a few minutes. Sometimes just removing yourself from that odor can prevent nausea or headache from ramping up. I've politely excused myself from a room when a strong fragrance hit me wrong, saying I needed a bit of air. The big picture here is to create a migraine-friendly bubble for yourself as soon as you sense these sensitivities. Think of it as lowering the sensory volume. This early adjustment can make the impending migraine less severe because you're not pouring more stimuli onto an already overwhelmed nervous system. I've found that by sitting in a quiet, softly lit room for even half an hour when I catch this sign, I often shorten the migraine, or sometimes it ends up being a mild one that I can tolerate. On the other hand, if I ignore it and keep, say, shopping in a bright, loud store, I usually pay for it later with a worse headache. Finally, let your loved ones know about this sign. It's helpful if the people around you know that if you start wearing sunglasses in the house or asking for some quiet time, you're not being odd, you're coping with a migraine symptom. Educating them prevents misunderstandings, and they can assist, like turning down lights or noise for you. Remember, you're not being a bother by asking for these adjustments, you're taking care of your health. Most folks, especially family and friends, will gladly dim the lights or keep the volume down if they understand why it helps you. Warning sign 5. Visual disturbances, aura. This warning sign can be one of the most startling if you've never experienced it before. It's often called an aura, but I like to just describe what it feels like: visual disturbances. This can mean seeing things like flickering lights, zigzag lines, shimmering spots, or even having a partial loss of vision, like a blank or blurry spot in your sight. The first time this happened to me, I was in my early 50s. I was reading a book and suddenly noticed a small bright spot, kind of like when you look at a light bulb and then look away, that little afterimage. Except it didn't go away. Instead, it started growing into a shimmering arc of light that danced and zigzagged at the edge of my vision. I could still see, but this thing was getting bigger and it worried me. I remember it vividly. It was shaped sort of like a crescent or the letter C, shining with a jigsaw pattern. I thought I might be having a retinal problem or even feared a stroke. It lasted maybe 20 to 30 minutes and then it faded. I felt so relieved, until the headache hit shortly after. That was my first introduction to migraine aura. Not everyone with migraines gets a visual aura. Only about 1 in 5 people do. But for those of us who do, it's a very clear, quite literally visible, warning sign that a migraine is about to strike. Sometimes, instead of flashy lights, the visual aura can appear as a blurry patch or a blind spot. For example, another time I was typing an email and realized I couldn't see the middle of the screen clearly. Letters were missing. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but it persisted until I realized it was an aura again. A friend of mine, Gloria, who's 74, described her aura as looking through a frosted window or like there's water in her vision distorting things. She even once saw a shape like a castle turret made of light. Migraines can create some strange illusions. If you ever experience these visual disturbances, it's important to stay calm. I know that's easier said than done because it can be frightening. The first instinct might be, am I going blind? Is this a stroke? It's always wise to mention new symptoms like this to a doctor, especially the first time, to rule out other issues. But if you're a known migraine sufferer and this is part of your pattern, you can be fairly sure it's the migraine aura, and it will usually resolve within an hour or less on its own. The key thing here is that it's a big waving flag. Hey, a migraine is coming very soon. Often the headache follows within minutes to an hour of the aura. Now, how do we handle a visual aura when it strikes? Priority 1, safety. If you're doing something like driving or chopping vegetables when your vision suddenly goes wonky, stop what you're doing as soon as you can safely do so. Pull over the car if you're driving. I cannot stress that enough. I've had to do it. I once pulled into a parking lot and waited out the 20 minutes of an aura before continuing to drive. No errand is worth risking an accident. If you're out and about, find a place to sit. If you're at home, sit or lie down. Basically, make sure you won't be in danger if your vision gets temporarily worse. Next, I let the people around me know what's happening. If someone is with me, I might say, I'm seeing an aura. I might not see clearly for a little bit. This is important so they understand why you might suddenly need help or need to rest. When I had that first big aura while reading, I told my husband and he helped me lie down and got me some water, and he just sat with me, which was comforting. Rest your eyes. Close them if you want. It won't make the visual noise go away completely, since the source is the brain, not the eyes, but it can help you feel calmer. Sometimes I keep one eye closed if the aura is mainly in one eye, though typically it's in both eyes, just affecting one side of the vision. I also like to massage my temples and forehead gently. It gives me a feeling of doing something, even if it's just soothing. Some people find that taking their migraine medication at the aura stage can actually stop the migraine from developing or make it milder. I've had some success with that. For instance, if I take an ibuprofen or the prescription my doctor gave me right when I see the lights, the ensuing headache is often less intense. This is something to talk about with your doctor. Ask if you should treat at the aura or wait. Many doctors say treat early if you can. For a more natural approach, as soon as the aura starts, I often drink a glass of water and maybe a small cup of coffee, since caffeine sometimes aborts my migraines. Then I lie down in a dark, quiet room. I keep mentioning lying down, dark room. You might have noticed that's a common theme in migraine management. It really does help across many symptoms. If the aura comes with any anxiety, understandable since it's not fun losing your vision temporarily, I practice grounding techniques. For example, I'll do the 5-4-3-2-1 method. Think of 5 things I can touch: my clothes, a pillow, the floor, etc. For things I can hear, clock ticking, distant bird, etc. 3 things I can feel: my heartbeat, the cool air, my breath. 2 things I can smell, maybe the tea next to me or the scent of soap on my hands. 1 thing I can taste, a mint or just the taste in my mouth. This shifts focus away from the visual freak out a bit, helping the time pass until it's over. One more note: keep track of your auras. I note when they happen and how long they last. In my case, I realized most of my auras last around 20 minutes and then I usually have about 10 minutes before the headache starts. So I have roughly a 30-minute window to get myself home or get medication in me. Knowing that timeline can reduce panic because you learn what to expect. In summary, visual disturbances can be unnerving, but by treating them as a helpful warning rather than just a scary symptom, you can turn the situation to your advantage. It's your body giving you a heads up, literally a heads-up display of flashing lights telling you to prepare. Respond by ensuring safety, resting, possibly medicating early, and calming yourself. With these steps, you'll handle the aura with more confidence and possibly lessen the overall migraine impact. Warning sign 6. Tingling or numbness. Now let's talk about another type of aura, not visual this time but sensory changes in your body. Some people, especially as we get older, might dismiss a bit of tingling as a sign of poor circulation or a pinched nerve. But when it comes on suddenly and is followed by a migraine, it's likely not a pinched nerve at all. It's a migraine warning sign. I'm referring to that weird pins and needles sensation or numbness, often on one side of the body. It can affect your hands, arms, face, or tongue. The first time I experienced this, it was my left hand. I was sitting on the couch knitting, one of my favorite hobbies, when I noticed my fingertips felt tingly, like they were falling asleep. I shook my hand thinking maybe I'd held it in one position too long. But the tingling crawled up a bit into my arm, and that's when a little alarm bell rang in my head. Years ago, I'd read that migraines can sometimes mimic stroke symptoms. And tingling or numbness on one side can be either very frightening. I did consider for a moment if I needed to call 911. But I also noticed I wasn't weak, I could still grip things and I didn't have drooping or anything. I decided to sit and observe. Within about 15 minutes, the odd sensation subsided. I thought, phew, okay, maybe it was nothing. But soon after, my familiar migraine headache began to build. That's when I knew that tingling had been a migraine aura too, just in a sensory form. Since then, I've had it a few more times, not often thankfully. Sometimes it's just a numb feeling in my cheek or lips, other times a prickly feeling in one arm. I want to emphasize, if you've never had this before, do consider getting medical attention to rule out a stroke or transient ischemic attack, TIA. Especially in older adults, sudden numbness can be very serious. It's better to be safe. In my case, I had already spoken to my doctor about it after that first time. We did some checks and since it lined up perfectly with migraine and I've had migraines with aura and other forms, we attributed it to that. Now I know it's part of my migraine repertoire, rare but possible for me. Let me share Patricia's story. Patricia, a lovely woman from my church, is 73. She told me once that before her migraines she gets a numb, tingling feeling on the right side of her face, along her cheek and mouth. The first time it happened she too feared stroke. She went to the ER, got tests. Everything was normal and the doctors concluded it was a migraine aura symptom. She said it's such a peculiar feeling, like when you get Novocaine at the dentist, that numb heavy feeling, but she hadn't been to the dentist. Now, whenever it happens, she knows a migraine is coming very soon, usually within a half hour for her. Patricia has learned to use this sign as her signal to get home, if she's out, and get ready to rest. In a way, she's thankful she gets this warning because sometimes she doesn't have any other sign. So, how do we cope with this tingling or numbness aura? A lot of the management is similar to the visual aura. Make sure you're safe and not alone if possible. If my hand or arm is tingling a lot, I definitely won't carry a hot cup of tea or try to drive or do anything requiring strong grip. I'll put things down so I don't accidentally drop them if numbness increases. If my face is involved, I'll check that I can swallow properly, just to be sure it's not dangerous. Usually with migraine aura, it's just sensation, not actual loss of function, but I like to double check. The next step is to relax and let it pass, because like the visual aura, the sensory aura typically doesn't last too long, maybe 10 to 30 minutes. I sit or lie down. One thing I do is gently move the tingling limb if it's a limb. I might flex my fingers, rotate my wrist, or lightly massage the area. This probably doesn't stop the aura, since it's not truly a blood flow issue that you can rub out, but it comforts me psychologically and possibly helps normal sensation return faster once the aura phase is ending. If the tingling is in my face, I might lightly tap my cheeks or move my jaw around just to reassure myself I have control. Breathing exercises are very useful here too. When any aura hits, there's that risk of panic, which is natural. These symptoms are unsettling. So I will do slow deep breathing. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 6 or 8 seconds, something like that. Focusing on the breath can reduce anxiety and also possibly help oxygenate if that has any effect on the aura. I also take this time to prepare for the headache like I mentioned in the visual aura section. Often I'll fetch a glass of water, maybe take a preemptive dose of pain reliever, with my doctor's guidance on this. If you have a prescribed migraine medication like a triptan or others, many doctors say taking it at the first sign of aura can help blunt the headache. I personally use a nasal spray migraine medication, and I will use it when I get a sensory aura sometimes. It often shortens the migraine. During the tingling phase, I try to minimize sensory input similar to other signs. For example, if I was watching TV, I turn it off. If I was in a busy place, I find somewhere quiet. Basically, I treat it as the migraine is starting, and act accordingly to make myself comfortable. One more tip, reassure yourself mentally. I actually give myself a little pep talk when I have this symptom. I'll say in my mind, okay, I've felt this before. It's scary, but it will pass. I'm not in danger. It's just the migraine stirring up my nerves. I'll be okay. It sounds a bit cheesy, but it truly helps keep me calm. Stress and fear can actually make migraines worse, so calming the mind is a form of treatment too. After the numbness or tingling fades and the headache phase begins, I follow my usual migraine routine: rest, dark room, cold pack on head if needed, medicine, etc. In a way, having the aura finish and the headache start is almost a relief because at least the weird symptoms are gone, and I know what I'm dealing with, pain I'm familiar with. The aura is like a strange mystery, but the headache, while awful, is the familiar foe. Remember, always keep your doctor informed about such symptoms. If your migraine pattern changes or a symptom worries you, it's worth discussing. Health in our senior years can be complex, and one doesn't want to misjudge something. However, once you have confidence that this tingling is my migraine aura, you can handle it with a lot more peace of mind. It becomes another signal to respect and a cue to care for yourself. Warning sign 7. Trouble speaking or sudden confusion. This particular warning sign is one that can really catch you and your family off guard. Having difficulty speaking, finding the right words, or feeling suddenly confused before a migraine. Imagine you're trying to say something and the wrong words come out, or you know what you want to say but can't quite articulate it. Or maybe you're doing a routine task and suddenly feel confused about the next step. It's a disorienting experience, and it's one that I've unfortunately become familiar with due to migraines. In migraine terms, this falls under that aura category as well, often called a speech aura or language aura. It's less common than visual aura, but it definitely happens to some of us. The fancy name is transient aphasia, aphasia meaning difficulty with language. Essentially, the migraine temporarily messes with the language centers of your brain. The result? You might slur a bit or speak slowly or swap words unintentionally, like saying door when you mean floor, or not be able to get a word out at all. Alternatively, you might have trouble understanding what someone else is saying for a few minutes, as if they're speaking a foreign language even though they're not. I'll share my personal scare with this. One evening I was trying to tell my husband that our daughter had called and would visit on the weekend. Simple message. But as I spoke, I heard myself say a jumbled sentence, something like, Sarah phoned and she will come on the watermelon. I had meant to say weekend, not watermelon, and I realized mid-sentence that what I said made no sense. I stopped and tried again, and I just couldn't find the word weekend. It was like my mind went blank on that word and on how to form the sentence properly. My husband looked at me with alarm, and I immediately thought, stroke? He even asked me some quick orientation questions like, what day is it? Who's the president? We were both thinking about stroke signs. But I could answer those. I wasn't truly confused about everything, just having trouble speaking one coherent sentence. And guess what? Within 15 minutes I got the familiar aura lights in my vision and then a migraine. That's when we realized it was likely the migraine aura causing the speech issue. We later confirmed with my doctor that yes, migraines can do that, as crazy as it sounds. Another case. My friend Sam, 74 years old, recounted to me that he sometimes can't write properly when a migraine is coming. He was writing a grocery list and what ended up on the paper were misspelled, jumbled words that didn't make sense. That was very unlike him. He's normally meticulous, and soon after he developed a migraine. Now he knows if he's typing an email or writing and the words start to scramble, it's a sign. So, if you experience this sign, how to manage it? First and foremost, assess quickly if it might be something more serious like a stroke. The overlap in symptoms can be similar, and in older adults, we never want to misjudge that. The rule of thumb is if you have speech difficulty accompanied by any weakness in one side of your body, drooping of the face, or if it doesn't resolve quickly, in minutes, or if you have risk factors for stroke, do not hesitate, seek emergency care. It's always better to be safe. However, if you're a seasoned migraine sufferer and you recognize this as your typical aura, you can proceed with your migraine game plan. When I notice this happening now, I immediately stop whatever cognitive task I was doing. If I was speaking, I pause and stop trying to push through the sentence. If I was reading or writing, I put it down. Fighting it tends to just frustrate me and raise my anxiety. I let whoever I'm talking to know briefly, give me a moment, I'm having trouble getting my words out. If it's someone who knows my migraines, they understand. If it's a stranger or someone I'm less comfortable with, I might just excuse myself to the restroom or a quiet area until it passes. Rest and calm are key here too. I will sit down and practice deep breathing, similar to how I handle other aura symptoms. The brain is under stress, so we want to reduce any extra strain. That means no bright screens, no intense conversations or decisions in that moment. If I'm home, I might even lie down and close my eyes, which helps me not worry about what I should be saying or doing. One strategy one use, grounding and reassurance. Just like with the sensory aura, I remind myself, I've been here before. This is likely the migraine starting. My speech will come back to normal soon. I might test myself gently by saying the alphabet slowly or a familiar song, something low pressure to keep track of my speech. Usually within several minutes to a half hour, I'm back to speaking fine, aside from maybe slurring a bit if the migraine pain has started, but that's more from fatigue. If you have medication to take early, this is the time to take it as long as your doctor agrees. I have a dissolvable tablet for migraines, a triptan, that I can put under my tongue. It's kind of ironic, taking something for headache when I don't have a headache yet, just weird speech, but when I do that, I found the impending headache can be much milder. Another coping method. Enlist help if needed. For example, if I was in the middle of cooking and I suddenly can't think straight due to this aura, I'll turn off the stove and ask someone else to handle it or just leave it be. If I was out shopping and suddenly got confused about what I needed, I'd abandon the errand and return when I'm clear-headed. It's okay to hit pause on activities until your brain's back online. This symptom can be embarrassing. We're so used to being articulate by this age, it's frustrating to fumble for words like a teenager who forgot their lines in a play. But remind yourself, it's temporary and not a reflection of your intelligence or sanity. In fact, a little humor can help lighten the mood for everyone. I once joked to my husband during an aura, well, looks like my brain's decided to take a coffee break. It should clock back in soon. We chuckled and it reduced the tension we were feeling. Lastly, share this experience with your doctor regularly, especially if it's new or changing. I keep bringing it up in checkups to ensure we're still confident it's migraine related. It also helped to educate my family that this can happen with migraines. They were relieved to learn that such speech mix-ups, while scary, can be benign in the context of migraine. Knowledge is power. When everyone knows what's happening, they can be more supportive and less fearful. In summary, trouble speaking or sudden confusion is a dramatic but fortunately short-lived warning sign for some migraine sufferers. Treat it as you would a sudden squall in the weather. Pull over, figuratively or literally, wait it out, get your bearings, and soon you'll be on your way again. And when you do resume normal activities, do so gently because by then the headache might be in bloom and you'll want to continue to be in that protective, low-stimulation mode. Warning sign 8. Changes in appetite or thirst. The last warning sign we'll cover might not immediately scream migraine to you, but it's surprisingly common once you start noticing it. It has to do with your appetite and thirst. This can manifest in a couple of ways. Some people get strong cravings for certain foods, often sweets or carbohydrates, before a migraine. Others might lose their appetite or feel slightly nauseated early on, even before any pain. And then there's thirst. You might feel parched and drink a lot, or you might find you're running to the bathroom more frequently. Yes, increased urination can be an early migraine sign for some. It's as if the body's internal balance is a bit off kilter as the migraine process begins, and it shows up in our eating and drinking patterns. In my personal experience, I've noticed a peculiar thing. I get a sweet tooth when a migraine is coming. I normally eat fairly healthily and don't crave sweets often. But I recall a few instances where, say, after lunch I just had to have a piece of chocolate or a cookie. It felt almost like a low blood sugar moment, but wasn't really. One time I ate 2 donuts at a church function, which is unlike me, and that evening I ended up with a migraine. At first I blamed the sugary indulgence for triggering the migraine, since sometimes certain foods can trigger headaches. But later I wondered, was the craving itself the early sign? Perhaps my brain was already craving quick energy, glucose, before the migraine hit. Indeed, many migraine sufferers report sugar or carbohydrate cravings in the prodrome phase, meaning a day or so before the headache. Another example. I have a friend, Alan, 67, who says he can predict a migraine if he finds himself unusually hungry and snacking all day. His body just starts stocking up on calories and then bam, migraine next day. Conversely, I've met people who feel off their food before migraines. Nothing sounds good to eat and they have to force themselves to have a meal. Now let's talk about thirst and bathroom habits. I personally get very thirsty at times pre-migraine. I'll drink lots of water or tea and still feel dry mouthed. It's like my body can't get enough fluid. And yes, then I'll need to pee more often, which one might think is just because I drank more, but interestingly, increased urination can happen even aside from that as part of the migraine prodrome signals. The science isn't entirely clear why this happens, but it might be related to hormones or the autonomic nervous system changes during a migraine's early phase. Some researchers believe the kidneys may even be prompted to excrete more water, hence more peeing, as part of the migraine cascade. I remember one day specifically, I was perfectly fine in the morning, then by afternoon I drunk about 4 big glasses of water and a lemonade because I just felt so thirsty. I also kept nibbling pretzels and crackers. That evening I realized I had gone to the bathroom what felt like every hour. Sure enough, later that night I got a migraine. At the time I joked, either I'm turning into a fish or something's up. Now I know for me that's a sign. So, how do we manage these appetite and thirst changes as signals? First, acknowledge them. It's easy to dismiss a craving or thirst as just random, but if you tie it to migraines you can use it as a helpful cue. Keep a small journal or log of your diet and symptoms. That's how I confirmed my patterns. I jot down craved chocolate, felt very thirsty, and then note if a headache followed. After a few instances, it became clear. When a craving hits, especially for something sugary or specific, I indulge a little but with caution. A small piece of chocolate or a cookie is fine. But I try not to go overboard because a sugar crash later might make me feel worse during a migraine. I also make sure to eat balanced meals on time. Sometimes a craving for carbs could mean your body needs energy. Perhaps you didn't eat enough earlier. So I might have a healthy snack, like a banana or some whole grain crackers, and then see if I still want the sweet. Often satisfying a bit of the craving plus real nourishment helps. And if I truly just want that piece of cake, I'll have a few bites and enjoy it. Stress about should I or shouldn't I can be counterproductive. In terms of thirst, my rule is to go ahead and hydrate but do it smartly. I'll drink water, maybe add a little electrolyte powder or a pinch of salt and sugar to make my own rehydration drink if I've been chugging plain water all day. This ensures I don't dilute my electrolytes too much. Staying well hydrated can actually shorten a migraine for me, or at least I avoid getting a dehydration headache on top of the migraine. If I find I'm running to the bathroom a lot, either from drinking or as a direct symptom, I plan around it. That might mean I won't go on a long walk far from a restroom, or I'll stick closer to home. Frequent urination usually settles once the migraine hits or passes, so it's a short-term inconvenience. Another interesting management tip. Some migraineurs will actually consume a bit of caffeine with their craving. For example, if craving chocolate, have a small piece of dark chocolate which has some caffeine, because caffeine can ward off migraines. But be careful, too much caffeine can trigger headaches in some and affect sleep. For me, a little coffee or tea during prodrome sometimes helps as mentioned. Also, consider this, sometimes a food craving might lead you to a trigger. For instance, if you always crave cheese or red wine before migraines, those items might actually trigger the headache to be worse. It's a tough call. Is the craving the sign or the cause? Possibly both. My approach is moderation and observation. If I crave something like chocolate, which is a known trigger for some, I'll have a small piece, not a whole bar. One more thing. Don't neglect nutrition even if you aren't hungry. If you lose your appetite as a sign, you should still try to eat something light like a bowl of soup or a smoothie, because an empty stomach can make migraine nausea worse once the headache comes, or even be a trigger on its own, low blood sugar. I've sipped broth in those cases just to have something. A little toast with honey or a few bites of fruit can keep you from getting too weak. In essence, treat changes in appetite or thirst as the body's clues. If you're craving, moderate it and use it as a reminder. Alright, a migraine might be en route, let me get prepared. If you're thirsting, drink up and consider it a heads up too. These signs are some of the more subtle ones, but once you validate them for yourself, they become a useful early warning system. It's almost like your body's saying, fuel up and hydrate now, you're going to need it for what's coming. By responding to that, you put yourself in a better position to handle the migraine. I know that if I go into a migraine well hydrated and not starving, I generally fare better than if I was dehydrated or hungry. And with that, we've covered 8 major warning signs. There are others out there, like some folks get a stiff or pressure feeling in the ear, some get yawns, which we did talk about, and some get mood swings, we talked about that too. Everyone's a little different, but these 8 are among the most commonly reported early signals in one form or another. We've journeyed through quite a list of warning signs, and if it seems like a lot, remember, you don't have to experience all of them. You might have just a couple that are your personal telltales. The key takeaway is that our bodies are often speaking to us in subtle ways before a migraine, and with a bit of attention and care, we can listen and respond kindly. Why does understanding these signs matter so much? Because knowledge is power, especially when dealing with something as disorienting as migraines. By catching the early whispers, be it a cranky mood, an unexplained wave of tiredness, a kink in your neck, or any of the signs we discussed, you can take steps to reclaim a sense of control and peace. It's almost like getting a gentle nudge saying, take care of yourself now, a storm might be coming. And when you heed that nudge, you often can soften the storm. I've found that since I started recognizing my own early symptoms, my migraines have become a bit less of a dreaded surprise and more of a challenge I know how to prepare for. It reduces my anxiety because I don't feel as out of control. I have my toolkit ready, whether that's a quiet room, a glass of water, a warm neck wrap, or my medication. It has truly helped me find more peace in my days, even with a chronic condition like this. I want to gently encourage you. If you notice any of these signs or any new symptoms that worry you, please speak with your doctor. This is especially true for us in our older years. It's important to rule out other causes and make sure what you're experiencing is indeed migraine-related and not something else. Doctors can also give you personalized advice on how to handle these prodrome symptoms or adjust medications if needed. So keep them in the loop. Think of it as having a team, you and your healthcare provider, working together to keep you feeling your best. Another thing, share your experiences. Migraines can be a lonely experience, partly because once the headache hits, you often isolate yourself in a dark room. But before and after, it helps so much to connect with others who understand. If you have friends or family who also get migraines, talk about it. What signs do they notice? What helps them? You might learn a new trick, or you might teach them something from this video. And consider sharing in the comments here. What early signs do you get and what have you found that helps? I created this video in the spirit of us seniors supporting each other. We've all accumulated so much wisdom through a lifetime of overcoming difficulties. This is just one more area where we can lend that wisdom. I also invite you to share any remedies or comfort measures you rely on. Maybe you have a special peppermint tea that eases your nausea, or a breathing exercise that calms you, or a particular pillow that supports your neck. Your tip might be exactly what another person in our community needs to hear. Migraines might make us feel weak at times, but in sharing, we all become stronger together. Living with migraines in our golden years is certainly not what we wished for, but it's the reality for many of us. Still, I firmly believe that understanding our bodies, even when they throw us curveballs, helps us maintain a sense of agency and dignity. Instead of feeling like a victim of migraines, we become a manager of them. Every time you identify a warning sign and take action, give yourself a little mental pat on the back. That's you taking charge of your health and comfort. As we wrap up, I want to reflect on something deeper. At our age, we truly understand the value of each day, each moment of clarity and joy. Migraines can steal a day or two from us, which can be frustrating. But by catching the warning signs, we often can reduce what they take. Maybe turning what could have been a terrible day into just a mild one, or avoiding the worst of the pain. That means more time to do what we love, whether it's playing with the grandkids, tending the garden, reading a good book, or simply enjoying a cup of coffee in the morning sunshine without that cloud of pain. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you found this talk helpful, maybe even comforting, knowing that someone else out there, me, truly gets what you're going through and is cheering you on. If you found any of these insights useful, please consider giving this video a thumbs up, a like, so more people can find it. Feel free to subscribe to our channel for more discussions on living our best life as we age. We tackle all sorts of topics with heart and humor. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video comes out. We're a community here and your presence matters. I'd also love it if you left a comment below sharing your thoughts. Maybe mention which warning sign resonated most with you, or if you have your own unique sign that others might not know about. And if you have a question, I'll do my best to answer, or perhaps someone else in our supportive community will chime in. Lastly, if you know someone, a friend, a spouse, a parent, who could benefit from this information, please share this video with them. It might help them feel less alone and more empowered in dealing with their migraines. Remember, even with migraines or any health challenges, we are in this together. Age has given us resilience and wisdom. Migraines are just one more thing we can handle with a bit of knowledge, preparation, and support. Take good care of yourself. You deserve all the gentle care and understanding in the world. Here's to more peaceful days and knowing that even when the clouds of a migraine gather, we have the tools to weather it. Thank you again for watching. Stay well, stay hopeful, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.